Her daughter called her a resource drain, loud enough for the chemo nurse to flinch. Nancy Holloway, retired librarian and widow, didn't flinch. Erica, her only child and presumed heir, smirked and went back to scrolling. By Monday, Nancy's will, trust, medical proxy, and passwords would no longer include her. She'd spent a lifetime funding Erica's comfort. Now she was funding her absence. And when eviction day came, it wouldn't be rage that answered the door. It would be legal proof she no longer owed anyone grace. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The chair hissed as it reclined, faux leather creaking under Nancy's narrow shoulders. She shifted slightly, angling her arm just right for the nurse, who was gentle and fast, sliding the needle in with practiced ease. The fourth line blinked green. The saline pushed in first, cool and unassuming, just before the chemotherapy drip began its slow descent into her bloodstream. Outside, the sky was a thin, pale gray, the kind that made you forget what season it was. Nancy stared at it, past the humming radiator and the vague sound of a television playing a muted cooking show across the room. Her hands, folded in her lap, didn't shake. Not today. Seriously, can you just try again later? Came a voice sharp enough to cut tissue paper. Erica! She stood near the nurse's station, phone angled toward her cheek, oversized sunglasses still on top of her head like an unfinished thought. She was dressed in her usual contradiction: leggings and a designer bag, messy bun and fresh acrylics. I said she's getting her chemo, Erica snapped into the phone. No, I'm not free after. I'm stuck here for 3 hours watching someone dissolve. God. The nurse behind the counter glanced up, eyes flicking toward Nancy with something between sympathy and discomfort. Erica rolled her eyes, disconnected the call, and turned to the nurse. Honestly, I don't know why they're still treating her. She's just draining resources at this point. Nancy heard it. Every word. The phrase landed softly, but the echo inside her was thunder. The nurse flinched, just slightly, then turned back to her clipboard, trying to pretend her face hadn't changed. Nancy didn't speak. She didn't move. She just let her gaze drift back to the window. A bird hopped along the branch of a skeletal tree. Just one. No nest. No noise. The minutes ticked by. The bag slowly emptied. By the time Nancy was wheeled out to the curb, the sky had dimmed a shade darker. Erica was already in the driver's seat, scrolling through her phone with one hand, the other tapping the steering wheel impatiently. The drive home was quiet. Nancy didn't say much, neither did Erica. At the red light near their neighborhood, Nancy turned to her daughter. You know, you don't have to come anymore. If it's such a burden. Erica didn't look up from her phone. Well, I'm not gonna just let you Uber to chemo. Nancy didn't reply. She simply turned her head back toward the road and smiled faintly at the irony. That night, after Erica disappeared into her room, earbuds in, door closed, no goodnight, Nancy made herself a cup of chamomile tea and carried it to the den. The old floor lamp buzzed faintly as it warmed the corner of the room. She opened her laptop, the screen casting a pale glow across her lined face. Password entered. Security code retrieved. Tabs opened one by one. Bank of America. Chase. Edward Jones. 6 figures total. No debt. No shared accounts. It had taken a lifetime of rationed treats, canceled vacations, garage sale furniture, and coupon clipping. She'd gone without so much. For security, for legacy, for someone to be safe after she wasn't here anymore. Her cursor hovered over the Trusts and Beneficiaries tab. Then she opened a new text thread. Miles, it's Nancy. I need to amend the beneficiary list. Effective immediately. She stared at the message for a long time. Her thumb hovered, then pressed send. Outside her room, Erica laughed loudly at something on TikTok. Nancy didn't flinch. She closed the laptop, set it on the nightstand, and leaned back against the pillows, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket. Because for the first time in years, Nancy wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of leaving the wrong person everything she'd built from nothing. And that fear, it had finally burned out. Only clarity remained. The next morning, the dining table became Nancy's command center. Stacks of folders were arranged in careful order: IRA statements, savings, pension disbursement, and house title, free and clear. Her reading glasses rested on the bridge of her nose. A legal pad lay open beside her, already half filled with calculations and questions, each line underlined twice. She had made sacrifices for decades, working overtime shifts at the library, stretching meals, skipping holidays. There had been birthdays she celebrated with a single cupcake and a crossword puzzle because that was all she could afford after paying for Erica's braces, or Erica's camp, or Erica's second round of college classes she never finished. Now the numbers stared back at her like quiet trophies of self-denial. $117,845 in retirement, $63,210 in checking and savings combined, a home worth just under $400,000, no mortgage, no debt, only legacy. The doorbell rang at 10:06 a.m. Miles, her estate attorney of 22 years, arrived in a pressed gray suit and carried his leather briefcase like it held sacred scriptures. His eyes flicked toward the tea Nancy had prepared and the legal pad already waiting. He smiled. "You always were the most organized client on my roster." She didn't return the smile. "Not yet. I want to reassign everything," she said, "before anyone can contest it, before I'm too tired to mean it." Miles nodded slowly. "You're well within your rights, especially since you're still of sound mind. I'll notarize it myself if you need. Who's the new beneficiary?" Nancy turned the page on her legal pad, revealing a single name written in ink so dark it bled through. Jenna B. Holloway. Her goddaughter. A nurse. Not by blood, but by presence. Miles raised an eyebrow. "The nurse from St. Joe's?" Nancy nodded. "She's the only one who makes sure I eat, and the only one who asks if I'm afraid." The two spent the next 90 minutes reworking every detail. The living trust was updated to reflect Jenna as the primary beneficiary of Nancy's estate, including the house. The secondary beneficiary? A private charitable annuity fund in Nancy's name, set to go live upon her passing and benefit elder hospice education and caregiver support. Miles read the clause aloud. "No contest provision. Anyone who challenges this arrangement forfeits their claim to all assets, including personal property." "Good," Nancy said without hesitation. They signed the first batch of documents in blue ink, and Nancy placed them carefully into her metal lockbox. It went back into the second drawer of her bedroom dresser, the one with a broken handle Erica never bothered to fix. She locked it, twisted the key, and slid it into the toe of an old pair of flats no one had touched in years. Later that evening, Nancy made baked chicken with rosemary and mashed carrots, placing 2 plates at the table. Erica wandered in eventually, tossing her keys onto the counter and swiping through her phone. "Smells decent," she muttered, plopping down. "You make enough for 2, or am I fending for myself?" Nancy slid the plate in front of her without comment. Erica took a bite, then looked up with her usual smirk, the one she used when she wanted something. "So, who gets the house when you're gone?" she asked casually. "I mean, obviously I'll be living in it, but does it go into my name or the trust or what?" Nancy didn't even blink. She took a slow sip of her water and set the glass down gently. "The person who never left me," she said. Erica paused, chewing stalled, the words hanging heavy between them like wet laundry. "What does that mean?" she asked. Nancy reached for the salt. "It means some inheritances are earned." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. And Erica didn't push further, just stabbed at her carrots a little harder than necessary. That night, when the dishes were done and the house had gone still, Nancy walked to her dresser, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a blank envelope. On it, she wrote in soft pencil, "Contingency plan." She slipped it behind the documents already sealed. Because peace, she knew, had to be built with preparation. And Nancy had just begun construction. The calendar on the fridge still read January, though it was already mid-March. A magnet shaped like a pink flamingo held it in place, the kind of tacky trinket Erica thought was retro cute. Nancy hadn't turned the page. She hadn't wanted to mark any more dates that no one remembered. This last year had hollowed out more than just her health. She could count on one hand the number of hospital visits Erica had made, and still have fingers to spare. The last birthday had come and gone with a voicemail from Jenna and a cupcake from the neighbor's granddaughter. Erica had been at Palm Springs for a wellness retreat, which Nancy learned about from Instagram stories featuring poolside cocktails and influencer quotes. The house, once quiet and tidy, now felt like it belonged to someone else. Erica had moved in just until she got back on her feet after being laid off from her second marketing job in less than 2 years. That was 11 months ago. Since then, Erica had turned the guest room into her walk-in closet, the kitchen into her snack lab, and Nancy's car into her personal rideshare. She hosted friends on weeknights, drank boxed wine on the patio, and left half-finished projects scattered across every surface. What she never left behind was time, especially not on infusion days. Nancy sat alone more often than not. Numb arm, cold chair, fluorescent lighting, and told the nurses, "Oh, she couldn't make it today. She's got interviews." They never asked what kind. Nancy never lied, just softened the truth. Last Thursday, Nancy had come back early from a brief outpatient test and walked in through the side gate. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. The French doors to the living room were wide open, and Erica's laughter carried out with ease. "She's got money stashed," Erica was saying, her voice drenched in amusement. "She was always cheap, but she's got to be sitting on something. I mean, look at this place. Paid off. No mortgage. I'm just biding time." Someone chuckled. Ice clinked in a glass. "This house'll be mine soon enough." Nancy stopped moving. The grocery bag in her hand slid slightly, the orange inside thudding softly against her thigh. She turned around, walked the long way to the front door, and rang the bell like a guest. Erica opened it 5 minutes later, holding a solo cup and looking mildly annoyed. "You could have just come in, you know." Nancy nodded. "I didn't want to interrupt." That night, she didn't eat dinner. She just sat on the back patio in her robe and stared at the rosemary bush she'd planted 20 years ago. Still growing, still fragrant, still giving. Some things didn't know when to stop offering themselves. At 9:03 p.m., the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Mr. Lin from next door holding 2 paper bags. He was in his 70s, a retired engineer who now grew tomatoes the size of softballs. "Thought you might need these," he said shyly. "Erica forgot the grocery list again, I guess. You doing okay?" Nancy's mouth opened, then closed. She took the bags with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Tears slid down her cheeks before she could stop them. Mr. Lin offered a polite nod and left without asking questions. After she put the groceries away, Nancy took out the leather-bound notebook Jenna had gifted her last fall. She hadn't known what to do with it back then. Now she did. On the first page, she wrote, "Documenting disrespect, a year of being forgotten in my own home." She underlined it twice. Then, in deliberate handwriting, she began listing every slight, every overheard insult, every silent Tuesday she sat alone under fluorescent lights. Nancy didn't need a witness anymore. She was becoming her own. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the outline of justice began to sharpen. Not loud, not quick, but inevitable. The knock came just after 10 a.m., soft but familiar. Nancy opened the door to find Jenna standing there in scrubs, holding a tote bag and a half smile. "I had a day off. Thought maybe you'd need something," she said, shrugging. "Or someone." Nancy stepped aside without a word, and Jenna walked in, already pulling her hoodie sleeves up. She smelled faintly of eucalyptus and hospital soap, clean and real. Within minutes they were sorting laundry together, the hum of the washing machine steady in the background. Jenna fetched soup from the fridge, wiped down the counters, and changed the batteries in the smoke detector without being asked. None of it felt performative. "You really don't have to," Nancy started to say. "I know," Jenna replied. "That's why I'm here." Later, they sat on the patio with mugs of peppermint tea and the last of the cinnamon toast. Nancy exhaled slowly. "I've been thinking about shifting some responsibilities." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Medical decisions, executor rights, end-of-life care if it comes to that." The mug in Jenna's hand stilled. "You mean, take that from Erica?" Nancy nodded. She never truly had it. Jenna looked down. "She'll lose her mind." Nancy's voice was quiet, steady. She already lost her heart. That afternoon, Miles arrived with a briefcase full of files. They sat at the dining table, the same one where Erica once asked about inheriting the house like it was already hers. Nancy signed 3 pages, initialed 2 more. Jenna watched the ink dry, jaw tight. "She's going to see this as war," Jenna whispered. "It's not war," Nancy said. "It's insurance." By sunset, the documents were filed. Jenna was now Nancy's full medical power of attorney, executor of the estate, and sole named beneficiary. The trust was sealed behind a firewall Erica would never crack, not without consequence. That night, Nancy made 2 small donations in Jenna's name, one to a hospice education fund, the other to a support network for caregivers of terminal patients. Jenna didn't know about either yet. Nancy printed the confirmations, folded them, and slid them into a new manila folder labeled Legacy. The folder joined the others in the bottom drawer of her dresser: documents, letters, and a USB stick with messages saved under file names like "For When I'm Gone," "Read First and Trust Map," "Emergency Only." At midnight, unable to sleep, Nancy returned to the kitchen to warm some milk. There, on the table, was a piece of unopened mail addressed to Erica. She didn't normally snoop, but something about the envelope's thickness caught her eye. She picked it up. The return address was a probate law office. Inside, a consultation form, signed and dated 2 weeks prior, under Erica Holloway's name. Purpose of inquiry: estate rights and future claims regarding incapacitated parent. Nancy stared at it, pulse suddenly alive in her ears. Erica had been planning for her death long before Nancy had, not out of grief, out of greed. She folded the form, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into her notebook under the page titled "Documenting Disrespect." Then, slowly, she whispered aloud what she now knew to be fact. "She doesn't just want to watch me go. She wants to make sure I'm gone." The scan of the probate inquiry burned like static in Miles's inbox. He called Nancy before breakfast, skipping his usual pleasantries. "She's already fishing," he said, voice sharp. "Your daughter tried to schedule a pre-contest, the kind of thing people do when they think you won't last long enough to object." Nancy didn't respond right away. She was standing at the stove, watching her tea kettle tremble against the heat. "I figured," she said finally. "She's not subtle." Miles exhaled. "Then we need insurance." That afternoon, Miles arrived with a notary and a portable ring light. They set up in the den, where the light filtered gently through linen curtains. Jenna sat off to the side, holding a clipboard of affirmations. Nancy had braided her hair that morning and put on lipstick, not for vanity, but for clarity. The camera rolled. "My name is Nancy Holloway. I am 69 years old. I am of sound mind. I am making these decisions of my own free will." Her voice didn't waver once. She spoke plainly, naming the people she trusted. She stated her reasons, documented her fears. She described exactly why her choices would be challenged, and by whom. Miles called it a testamentary firewall. Nancy called it her final draft of truth. The file was encrypted, time-stamped, and stored across 3 servers, 2 legal, 1 private. That night, Nancy logged into her old bank account. The same one Erica had once asked to "just check balances for you real quick." Access denied. She smiled. The new trust had locked Erica out of every thread she used to tug. 3 days later, Erica barged into the kitchen, holding her phone. "Mom, did you change the login for the Chase account? I tried to pay the electric bill and—" Nancy didn't look up from her crossword. "That's a closed account." Erica blinked. "Since when?" "Since always." It wasn't a lie. The new account lived elsewhere, under a different name. That evening, Nancy listed a set of antique spoons on eBay. Then her old sewing machine. Then the Waterford vase she'd kept boxed for 30 years and never once displayed. Each listing was made under the username Quiet Exit 58. The funds went to a prepaid debit card, unlinked to anything Erica could trace. She started researching out-of-state assisted living facilities, focusing on private pay communities with strict guest policies. Her browser history was wiped each night. By the end of the week, she had changed every password, email, bank, medical records, even the garage opener. She closed the safety deposit box and opened another under Jenna's name as co-signer. Nancy never mentioned any of it. She still cooked dinner, still asked Erica how the job hunt was going. She still left fresh towels in the linen closet and replaced the expired almond milk. She just watched and waited, because Erica had started pacing more, asking strange questions like, "Have you seen the mail today?" And, "Are you feeling lucid lately?" As if they were casual. She also started opening drawers she used to ignore. Nancy took careful note in her journal, listing every behavior change under a new heading: forecasting storms. One night she found Erica at her desk, rifling through a drawer she'd left locked. The younger woman startled when Nancy entered. "I was looking for stamps," she said too quickly. "Top drawer?" Nancy said. "It's always been the top drawer." Erica nodded, cheeks flushed, and left the room. Nancy stood still in the doorway for a long time, then turned off the lights. Because she knew now. Erica wasn't just preparing for her death, she was trying to rehearse it. And Nancy? She was preparing to vanish before the curtain even rose. The appointment reminder had buzzed on Nancy's phone at 7:45 a.m. "Annual Wellness Review," it read. "Bring your designated healthcare proxy." She texted Jenna, "You free at noon? Scrubs optional." Jenna responded with a thumbs up and a heart, followed by always N. By the time they arrived at the medical center, the lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm printer paper. Jenna walked beside Nancy, steady and calm, her ID badge clipped to her tote bag more out of habit than necessity. At the front desk, the receptionist tapped keys. "Name?" "Nancy Holloway," Nancy said, sliding over her ID. "Do you have your medical proxy with you?" Jenna stepped forward. "She's listed," Nancy said. The receptionist smiled. "Got it. Right here. You're all set." The nurse came to escort them within moments, and Jenna helped Nancy gather her things. They walked back toward the exam rooms, light slanting across linoleum floors. 2 minutes later, the front doors hissed open again. Erica stormed in. She wore leggings, a zip-up hoodie, and sunglasses she didn't bother removing. Her ponytail was messy, not stylish messy, just unwashed, and her heels clicked louder than they needed to on the tile. "I'm here for my mom's appointment," she said to the receptionist. "Name?" "Erica Holloway, daughter. She's with Dr. Varela this morning." The receptionist blinked at the screen. "She's already been checked in, with her proxy." Erica frowned. "Well, I'm her daughter." The woman at the desk didn't flinch. "You're not on file." Erica leaned forward, voice lowered but still sharp. "That's my mother. She's not well. She forgets things. I should be on file." The receptionist offered a polite but firm smile. "I'm sorry. We can't disclose or update any medical status without her consent. I can give you a general contact card if you'd like." Erica didn't respond. She just turned on her heel and left, heels louder this time. At home that evening, the front door slammed. Nancy was at the stove stirring chicken soup with fresh thyme. She didn't flinch. Erica burst into the kitchen like a firework with nowhere to land. "What the hell was that today?" she snapped. Nancy didn't turn. "You'll need to be more specific. You cut me out of your medical access?" Nancy tasted the broth, needed more salt. She reached for it slowly. "I updated the record to reflect reality." Erica stepped closer, voice pitching. "You're ruining your own daughter's life!" Nancy turned then, finally, ladle in one hand. "No," she said calmly. "You did that yourself. I'm just finishing it up." Erica stood frozen. Nancy went back to the stove. The next morning, Jenna arrived with an overnight bag and a box of organic tea. Nancy greeted her at the door with a robe and a tired smile. "I cleared out the guest room," she said. "Do you want me here full time?" Jenna asked. Nancy shook her head. "Just weekends. Just enough." That night, Nancy sat in her bedroom with the door closed, journaling again. She wrote, "Today I watched someone try to erase me because I stopped letting her hold the pen." Then, on the next page, she underlined one phrase: "The guest room is no longer for guests." Down the hall, Jenna unpacked her scrubs and set a small photo of her and Nancy, laughing on the beach, on the nightstand. In the living room, Erica sat in the dark, scrolling through her phone, the Wi-Fi suddenly sluggish. She didn't know it yet, but she was now the guest. And the locks were slowly changing. Nancy made the wire transfer on a Thursday morning. She wore her softest cardigan, poured a cup of decaf, and dialed the number she'd saved 3 weeks earlier. Elmira Estates, a quiet, privately run assisted living community 2 hours north. No loud hallways, no assigned roommates, no fluorescent dining rooms that smelled of Jell-O and bleach, just garden paths, privacy, and dignity. "I'd like to move in by next week," she said, voice calm but firm. The woman on the phone confirmed the wire had posted. Nancy hung up and exhaled, hands steady. Then she opened her laptop again and scheduled a private transport service for Monday at 7:45 a.m., 1 van, 2 staff, all confidential. She didn't tell Jenna yet. That afternoon, she went through her closet. She picked what she needed, folded it carefully, and placed each piece into a canvas suitcase she hadn't used since her last wedding anniversary trip, 20 years ago. The rest, she listed for donation. She placed a post-it on a coat. "Let someone else be warm. I've done my time." Saturday evening, the call came. Nancy was reading in bed, herbal tea steeping beside her, when Erica's voice exploded down the hall. "Mom!" Nancy set down the book. Erica appeared at the bedroom door, holding her phone like it was evidence. "I just got a call from the bank. They said I've been removed as a joint holder. What the hell is going on?" Nancy sat up slowly, legs crossed at the ankle. "That's correct," she said. "You're not entitled to access anymore. You put me on that account after Dad died. I took you off after you forgot how to say thank you." Erica's face turned a shade darker. "You're seriously doing this? After everything?" Nancy tilted her head. "After everything, yes, exactly." "This is humiliating," Erica snapped. Nancy blinked once, then reached for her mug. "Respect isn't humiliation, but maybe that's new for you." Erica stood in the doorway for a beat too long, then stormed away, muttering curses into the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Nancy didn't flinch. She sipped her tea. Vanilla and chamomile, bitter and sweet. That night, she locked her room, not out of fear, out of finality. The next morning, before the sun crested over the backyard fence, Nancy was already dressed. The transport van pulled up silently, just as promised. Jenna arrived 15 minutes later, as scheduled. She loaded the last of the suitcases while Nancy walked through the house one final time. She paused at the mantel, touched the photo of her and Jenna at the beach, slipped it into her coat pocket. Then she left the house keys on the counter beside a single sheet of paper folded neatly in half. On it, in Miles's clean legal font, was the final twist Erica would never have seen coming. Effective immediately, 142 Pine Hill Drive is the legal property of Holloway Senior Trust, irrevocable. No right of tenancy remains with former occupants. Nancy stepped into the van without a sound. Erica didn't wake until 10:07 a.m. She padded into the kitchen, hair wild, still in slippers, expecting the usual. The clatter of a kettle, a passive-aggressive note about dishes. Instead, she found silence. And the letter. She skimmed the first line and dropped into the nearest chair. "Read it again. And again." "No," she whispered. But it didn't matter. Nancy was already gone. And the house? It no longer belonged to the daughter who had only ever seen it as a prize. It belonged to no one now, except the woman who'd built it. And finally, walked out with everything that mattered packed in one van, light, warm, free. The envelope arrived by courier. No knock, no signature required, just slid through the brass slot in the front door, landing silently on the hardwood floor of what used to be Nancy Holloway's home. Erica picked it up with the kind of distracted grace that came from years of believing consequences were optional. She slid it open with a butter knife and unfolded the first page. Notice to vacate. 10 days to surrender premises. Issued by Holloway Senior Trust Legal Counsel. Failure to comply will result in formal legal removal. She read it twice. Then again. "No," she whispered. She dropped it on the kitchen table, stared at it like it was written in another language. Her fingers hovered over her phone. And then, pure instinct, she began dialing. Aunt Lori? No answer. Uncle Mark? Voicemail. She shot off a group text to her cousins, her dad's sister, a high school friend who once told her she had good victim energy for big things. The message was brief. Mom lost her mind. Kicked me out. Can't talk long, can I crash for a bit? 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Silence. The only ping back came from her cousin Brittany in Boise. Nancy didn't lose her mind. She found her backbone. Maybe try that instead. Erica chucked her phone across the couch. The screen cracked. At 3:12 p.m., the doorbell rang again. This time, it was a process server. Short, polite, unreadable. He handed her a manila envelope and stepped off the porch without a word. Inside, restraining order filed petitioner Nancy Holloway, grounds, harassment, financial exploitation, medical interference. Erica barely made it to the kitchen sink before throwing up. She slumped onto the cold tile floor, back-pressed to a cabinet door, staring up at the ceiling she used to imagine repainting once the house was hers. Then the final humiliation hit her phone like a meteor. Jenna had posted something on Instagram, just a photo of an empty recliner with an IV stand beside it. The caption read, "My godmother was once called a resource drain, so she drained her abuser instead, and she left quietly, fully, on her terms. Elder justice, on not your inheritance. Dignity is defiance." Within hours, the post exploded. Shares, comments, duets, threads. One elder rights attorney quoted it with, "This is the story we've been waiting to tell, and we will." Another account reposted it under, "How to Legally Ghost Your Adult Child, Masterclass Edition." A journalist DM'd Jenna for an interview. An elder advocacy group offered pro bono publishing assistance. Nancy, who'd once believed her name would fade quietly with age, was suddenly a symbol. A quiet revolution. Erica, not to be outdone, crafted her own rebuttal that night. A 2-minute video, tearfully claiming elder abuse, emotional trauma, manipulation by Jenna, and a deliberate alienation campaign led by Nancy's lawyer. She posted it. Within 10 minutes, the comments were brutal. "Girl, you called your chemo-ridden mother a burden on camera. Sit down. Funny how you only started crying after the assets moved. Tell me you expected an inheritance without telling me you expected an inheritance." She deleted the video by morning, but the screenshots lived forever. Erica stared at the blank walls, the quiet rooms, the calendar still stuck on March. The furniture suddenly looked colder, less familiar. Like it, too, knew she didn't belong. The house had never been hers, not really. And now, the paper in her hand said that out loud. From her spot on the floor, Erica looked toward the hallway, once a path to her mother's bedroom, now just a dead end. And down the coast, 2 hours away, Nancy Holloway sat on a bench surrounded by lavender bushes, sipping lemon tea with Jenna beside her. She didn't know what Erica would do next, but she knew one thing for sure: whatever noise came next from that house, it wasn't her problem anymore. The courtroom was cooler than Nancy expected. Quiet, too. No gavel claps or drama, just the sterile hum of bureaucracy and the faint creak of folding chairs adjusting under discomfort. She sat at the plaintiff's table between Miles and Jenna, her IV port tucked discreetly beneath a soft cream cardigan. A scarf covered her thinning hair. But her spine stayed straight. Her hands didn't shake. Across the aisle, Erica leaned in to whisper to her attorney, a man in a tight navy suit with a Bluetooth still wedged in his ear. She wore a blazer too large for her frame, as if trying to borrow authority. But even from where Nancy sat, she could see the smudged mascara and bitten fingernails. Judge Rosalind Shaw, a woman with salt gray hair and a stare that left no room for theatrics, glanced down at the case file. "All right. We're here for Holloway vs. Holloway. Motion to contest power of attorney, executor rights, and asset transfer. Let's begin." Miles rose calmly. "Your Honor, the respondent seeks to challenge a legally binding estate revision by alleging diminished capacity. We'll be presenting documentary evidence, including a time-stamped video affidavit, financial logs, and corroborating witness statements of harassment and financial abuse." Judge Shaw nodded. "Proceed." Jenna stood, holding a thumb drive. "Exhibit A, Your Honor." The judge accepted it. The bailiff inserted it into the court's monitor. On screen, Nancy's recorded self appeared, lips painted, eyes sharp. Her voice, calm and unwavering, filled the room. "My name is Nancy Holloway. I am of sound mind. I revoke all prior expectations. Blood entitles no one to what I built." Erica fidgeted in her chair. Nancy glanced over, just once, and then looked away. The affidavit played on. Then came screenshots. Texts from Erica asking about liquidating assets early, notes from Nancy's journal, audio recordings of Erica referring to Nancy as a financial mess waiting to croak. The room remained still. Erica's attorney rose finally, too quick, voice a little too loud. "Your Honor, we dispute the timing and nature of these documents. My client asserts that Ms. Holloway was under undue influence." Judge Shaw raised a hand. "Counselor, I've read every file. Watch the footage. This is not undue influence. This is a woman reclaiming autonomy." "But," she cut him off, "you want to argue diminished capacity? Ms. Holloway just filed 3 tax returns and a property transfer without error. Her trust was amended under direct legal supervision, notarized and video verified." He tried again. "But her daughter is not entitled," the judge said flatly. The silence that followed was seismic. Then, "Motion to contest is dismissed. All prior designations remain valid. Ms. Erica Holloway is ordered to pay court costs and is hereby restricted under a 6-month no-contact provision pending further review." Erica gasped. Nancy didn't. She rose slowly, one hand bracing the table, the other tucked around her tote bag. Her port line peeked out from beneath her sleeve, the medical tape dull against her pale skin. Jenna offered an arm. Nancy didn't take it. She didn't need help walking anymore. She just needed the space to leave. At the doorway, Nancy paused, not to look back, but to steady herself. The press gallery had started to murmur. One reporter whispered to another, "That's the woman from the Post, right? The one who drained her abuser?" Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Jenna stepped forward to intercept them, but Nancy turned gently to face the crowd. No podium, no statement, just a nod. A quiet, resolute nod. Inside the courtroom, Erica sank into her chair, face blank, as if she'd finally heard the sentence no one spoke aloud. "You lost more than the money. You lost the story." And Nancy? Nancy walked out into the daylight with her scarf fluttering behind her like a flag. Subtle, soft, but unmistakably victorious. There was no parade, but justice didn't need trumpets. It just needed her to walk out upright. And she did, because this time the Echo didn't belong to someone else. It belonged to her. The hospice room turned study smelled faintly of citrus oil and printer ink. Nancy sat by the window in a soft gray cardigan, a velvet cushion under her spine, and a worn leather notebook cracked open beside her. The IV stand had been replaced by a sleek silver laptop. Her oxygen level was stable. Her tone was not. "I don't want this to read like a survival guide," she said, tapping her pencil against the desk. "I want it to read like a warning and a reckoning." Jenna, seated on the armrest of the sofa behind her, nodded slowly. "You've earned both." Nancy smiled. "Then let's get it right." She flipped through a folder labeled Journal Quotes, "Use with Care." A dozen marked pages bore headlines in Nancy's loopy script. She called it Help. I called it Absence. When silence doesn't protect you, it becomes part of the abuse. The most dangerous inheritance is expectation. The advocacy team had already assembled a ghostwriter, but Nancy insisted on crafting the spine herself. "I don't want a polished version," she told them. "I want the raw one, the kind women don't say aloud until the audience is gone." 3 weeks in, the working title was finalized, Held While Draining, One Woman's Exit from Silent Abuse. Nancy didn't blink when she saw it in the mock-up. "That's the story," she said. "That's the truth." Jenna handled the marketing side like she'd been born to do it, designing the cover, running an outreach campaign to elder justice groups, and managing social platforms under it Held While Draining. The handle drew thousands within days. By week 4, a podcast host from D.C. reached out. National platform, Survivor Series. We want your voice, not just your words, the producer said. Nancy hesitated until Jenna reminded her, you spoke up in court. This is just louder. The interview aired the following Thursday. Clean audio, tight edits. Nancy's voice, deliberate and honest, cut through earbuds and car speakers across the country. I wasn't dying. I was disappearing. She called me a resource drain, so I drained the account she thought she'd inherit, and I used it to build the freedom I was denied in life. It hit 300,000 streams in 6 days. 2 major media outlets requested follow-ups. One publishing imprint expressed early interest in adaptation rights. Nancy didn't care about the numbers, but she loved that the comments weren't about her illness. They were about her clarity. They were about her power. Meanwhile, on the other side of the digital divide, Erica's name surfaced again, but not for the reasons she hoped. She filed takedown notices for defamation of character and invasion of privacy. Each one was denied. The team had receipts. Miles had triple-checked the permissions. Nancy's audio and video rights were locked down tighter than a Senate hearing. Erica tried again. Another notice. Another denial. This time, Jenna responded publicly with a clipped video, Nancy's voice layered over slow pans of the legal documents. The caption read, "You tried to mute her. We gave her a microphone." Nancy sat beside Jenna as it went live. She watched in silence, then said, "Let them come." Jenna looked at her. "You're not afraid anymore, are you?" Nancy didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her pen. On a fresh page in her notebook, she wrote, "This isn't a memoir of decay. This is the anatomy of reclamation. I was supposed to leave quietly. Instead, I published the noise. Outside, the breeze rustled the garden ivy." Nancy turned to her laptop again. There were more pages to fill. And somewhere across town, Erica sat in the guest room of a borrowed apartment, watching her former life become a national story without her in it. She wasn't the narrator anymore. She wasn't even a footnote. And the final chapter? Nancy hadn't written it yet, but it was coming. Nancy placed the last photo frame on the small bookshelf near her window. Jenna, in her graduation gown, beaming and windblown, arms slung around Nancy's shoulders like it belonged there. She angled it just so, away from the glare of the afternoon light, and stepped back to admire the room. Soft white curtains breathed gently with the open window. A woven throw rested on the back of her reading chair. The scent of lemon balm drifted from the essential oil diffuser Jenna had gifted her. Her books, her notebooks, her stories, they all had space now. Nothing pressed in. The room didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a page she had finally chosen to turn. She sipped from a teacup, bone china with a pale green rim, and smiled at the sound of chatter just beyond the door. Former co-workers from the library had accepted her invitation. 3 women and 1 man, all retired now, all once the sort who remembered birthdays and stayed late to reshelve the hardbacks no one checked out anymore. Jenna appeared at the door, tray in hand. "Lemon scones, real butter, nothing gluten-free because life's too short," she said with a wink. Nancy chuckled. "Bless you for keeping the revolution alive." The little tea gathering took place in the sunroom. No agenda, no speeches, just old friends laughing softly about card catalogs and overdue fines and the absurdity of aging in a world that forgets how to look people in the eye. At one point, Mrs. Raskin leaned across the table and placed a warm hand over Nancy's. "You look peaceful, dear. And strong." Nancy didn't deflect. She just said, "It's peaceful here. It's the kind of quiet I chose." Later that evening, Jenna joined her on the porch swing outside the main building. A hush had fallen over the grounds, golden light spilling over the lawn like syrup. "We got the approval letter," Jenna said. Nancy raised a brow. "Nurse practitioner program, full acceptance, first choice school." Nancy exhaled, long and slow. "I know we said we'd wait till things calm down," Jenna continued, "but if I defer a year, I might lose the momentum. So..." Nancy reached into her cardigan and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "I transferred the full amount to the education trust last week," she said. "It's already yours." Jenna blinked. "Wait, you... without asking?" Nancy smiled gently. I never asked Erica if she was going to stay. I just gave her everything and hoped she'd see it. I learned my lesson." Jenna looked down, overwhelmed. Nancy added, almost offhand, "That's a return I never got from blood. And you gave it to me for free." The porch creaked beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime stirred, a sound like a memory passing gently through the air. Inside her suite, on the freshly organized desk, sat an envelope addressed to the local hospice foundation. Inside it, a check and a letter, co-written by Nancy and Jenna, requesting the establishment of the Holloway Endowment for Hospice Education. It would support continuing education for caregivers working with terminal patients, especially those with no surviving family. "This legacy isn't revenge," Nancy had said while drafting it. "It's rescue. For someone else." Jenna hadn't replied. She'd just nodded and kept typing. That night, after Jenna had gone home, Nancy lit a small beeswax candle and opened her journal. She didn't write much, just one line, etched deliberately. "Some of us don't get family by birth. We build it, carefully, out of what's left." She closed the journal, blew out the candle, and stared at the empty frame still sitting on the dresser. It had once held a photo of Erica as a child, gap-toothed, sticky-handed, laughing with abandon. Nancy picked it up, removed the back, slid the photo out. She didn't tear it. She simply placed it face down in the drawer and closed it without sound. Then she reached into her robe pocket, pulled out a new photo, Jenna, seated beside her in court, both of them upright and unafraid. She slid it into the frame and left it there beside the lavender and the light, because what comes next deserved a new face, and this time she'd chosen it. The form was simple: 3 checkboxes, 1 signature line, and a small box labeled "Notes, if any." Nancy took her time. She sipped mint tea between each line. The pen moved slowly, but not hesitantly. "No unscheduled visitors. Do not allow access to medical information. Add to restricted access list. Erica Holloway under notes." She wrote only, "This decision is not about punishment. It is about peace. Please respect that." She handed the clipboard to Ms. Chambers, the head resident coordinator, who read the form, nodded once, and filed it without commentary. That was the beauty of this place. No explanations were required to protect yourself. 2 days later, a courier envelope arrived. No return address, but the handwriting was instantly familiar. Slanted, rushed, dramatic in its loops. Erica's. It sat on the small table in the entryway for over an hour before Nancy finally picked it up. She held it like something fragile and sour, then walked to the front desk. "Can I return this to sender?" she asked. The clerk blinked, then nodded. "No need to open it?" Nancy smiled, soft but sure. "No." The letter was sealed back in a new envelope and sent off before sunset. That evening, on the screened porch just outside the memory care wing, Nancy watched the day fade slowly. The sky bled pink into copper into blue, the colors stretching without urgency. Jenna arrived with 2 bottles of sparkling elderflower water and an envelope in her hand. "She wrote again," she said quietly. "This time to me." Nancy raised an eyebrow. "She's asking if I'll talk to you. Says she wants to apologize." Nancy didn't answer right away. Jenna sat beside her, elbows on knees. "What if she means it?" Nancy turned her head, looked Jenna directly in the eye. "If she meant it," she said gently, "she would have changed when I couldn't hold a fork. Not now, when I'm holding boundaries." Jenna exhaled slowly, nodding. I didn't know what to say to her." "You just did," Nancy said. "You brought it here. That's enough." They sat in silence for a while, the wind brushing soft across their skin. The cicadas had started to hum in the distance early this year. Later that night, Nancy pulled out her phone and opened the voice memo app. She sat at her desk with the soft glow of the bedside lamp haloing her in amber. She pressed record. "My name is Nancy Holloway. I am of sound mind. If I relapse, if I forget who I am or why I left or who I chose to call family, this message is to remind whoever's caring for me that my peace is protected. I built it, brick by brick, memory by memory, and I do not give permission to tear it down just because I cannot speak it later. Please honor that. She hit save, labeled it Final Boundary, Do Not Override. She backed it up to her cloud drive and emailed it to Jenna, Miles, and the residential staff. No dramatics, just systems, just safeguards. She didn't cry. She felt more whole than she had in decades. That night, she sat again on the porch, alone this time. The stars had begun their slow dance above the trees, and the moon was crisp and full like a promise kept. She closed her eyes, tilted her face to the night sky. There was no urgency in her breath, no need to prove anything, no fear of what tomorrow might demand, because for the first time, the quiet wasn't a waiting room. It was her own. And no one, not blood, not guilt, not regret, was getting past the lock she had finally, lovingly, placed. She opened her journal to a blank page, then wrote, slowly, carefully, "Forgiveness is not an open door. Sometimes it's just a closed one that stays locked, and that's okay." The check arrived in a plain envelope with no fanfare. Just one line typed above the stub, "Final royalty disbursement, held while draining." Nancy held it between her fingers like she was weighing something delicate. The amount wasn't small, 5 figures, more than she'd ever made in a single deposit her entire life. A strange, almost impersonal reward for bleeding out on paper. Jenna found her in the garden alcove behind the dining hall, sunlight softening the lines at the corners of Nancy's eyes. "You saw it?" Jenna asked. Nancy nodded. "I did." "You keeping it?" Nancy passed the check wordlessly into her hand. "I already called the shelter," she said. "They're opening a new wing next month. For women like me, quiet ones who wait too long to speak." Jenna glanced down at the amount. Her breath caught. "You sure?" Nancy smiled, a little sideways. "They're naming the room after me." Jenna blinked. "Wait, like, actually?" Nancy leaned back into her chair, face turned to the sky. "The quiet fighter room," she said. "Their idea, not mine." Jenna wiped one cheek quickly, pretending it was just the breeze. 3 weeks later, the dedication was held in a modest ceremony. No podiums, no speeches, just a group of staff members, residents, and advocates standing under a canvas sign freshly hung over the doorway of a newly painted room, lavender walls, warm lighting, a bookshelf already full. On one side, a framed photo, Nancy in grayscale, sitting tall beside a microphone, expression calm but unwavering. Beneath it, a small plaque, in honor of those who left without applause, and still won. Back at Elmira, Jenna surprised Nancy with cupcakes and cider in the common room. The hospice nurses sang off-key. Someone played acoustic guitar. There was no fuss, just warmth. Nancy held the printed first edition of her book in her lap throughout. Later that night, when the others had left and the hallway lights dimmed, she settled onto the porch and opened the book again. This time, not to revise, not to analyze, just to read. She reached the line on page 198. "You can't be robbed of what you've already reclaimed." And for the first time, it didn't feel like survival prose. It felt like scripture. Across town, Erica stared at a courtroom wall with a foreclosure notice clipped to a file in her lap. Her bankruptcy claim had been processed, 3 credit cards defaulted, 1 overdraft protection revoked, and 0 co-signers left willing to vouch. She'd tried to reach out to a college friend for a loan. No reply. She'd emailed an old client asking for freelance work, rejected within 5 hours. She was no longer Erica Holloway, rising professional with a trust-fueled future. She was a woman who had gambled with legacy and lost, and the internet never forgets. She'd Googled herself last night. Page 1, the Instagram video. Page 2, held while draining media kit, legal footnotes included. Page 3, a think piece titled, "When Entitlement Meets the End of the Line." Her name was no longer hers to shape. Meanwhile, Nancy received a hand-addressed envelope from the shelter director. Inside was a Polaroid of the room they'd opened. The bed made neatly, a welcome basket of soft socks and chamomile tea, and a card written by a woman who now slept there. "Your story didn't just free you. It gave me permission to leave. Thank you." Nancy placed the card inside her journal, between the page marked Closure is not a courtroom and a blank one labeled, "What Comes After." She didn't gloat, she didn't raise a glass or write a new chapter titled Victory, but she did close the book gently. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like anything was missing. Because peace, she'd come to learn, doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it just looks like a room you funded, where another woman can finally sleep through the night. The scan results came in a pale blue folder, no fanfare, no dramatic music, just Nurse Liana's soft knock on the door and a gentle, "They're here, hun," as she placed the folder on Nancy's lap. Nancy's hands hovered for a moment before opening it. Inside, printed charts, numbers, shaded regions. Words that used to terrify her, tumor load, response zone, follow-up assessment, now felt like a second language she could finally speak with confidence. Partial remission, the note read, stable markers, reduction in spread, signs of healing. Nancy looked up at the nurse, a smile flickering to life. Liana blinked fast, as if holding back her own tears. "We hoped," she whispered. "We really did." Nancy reached out, took the nurse's hand. "You believed I was worth saving." "You are," Liana replied. "You've saved more than you know." That afternoon, Nancy sat with Jenna at the dining room table, Lexi bouncing a crayon between tiny fingers in the corner. The child was drawing something, a house, maybe, or a sun with extra arms. She hummed quietly to herself. Nancy pulled out the updated trust paperwork, already notarized, and turned to the final page. She slid her pen across the signature line. Jenna tilted her head. "You sure?" "I am," Nancy said. "She won't remember this document, but she'll remember love that followed her name." Lexi's name was now in the trust, not as an obligation, but as a future. Later that evening, when the sky had softened into its violet hush, Nancy opened the locked drawer in her desk. Inside sat a red file folder labeled Erica. She had touched it many times in the past year, added to it, removed from it, debated it. Now, she lifted it out slowly. She walked to the fireplace in the corner of the library suite, one she hadn't used since moving in, and placed the folder on the hearthstone. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, with a single match, she lit the corner. The flames caught fast, curling through affidavits, bank records, court transcripts, and journal entries. The paper blackened and curled inward, collapsing on itself like a story that no longer needed a reader. Nancy watched until the last edge turned to ash. Then she whispered, "That chapter's closed." 3 days later, Jenna drove them to the coast. The sun was mild, the tide forgiving. Lexi held Nancy's hand as they stepped barefoot into the sand. The girl squealed when the water touched her toes. Nancy laughed, truly laughed, and let the wind toss her hair, the scarf around her neck fluttering like a loose ribbon. They walked down the shoreline slowly, Jenna on one side, Lexi skipping ahead. Nancy stopped, closed her eyes, and drew a deep breath. The salt in the air didn't sting like it used to. The oxygen filled every corner of her lungs, and when she exhaled, it felt like something was leaving her for good. Grief, maybe, fear, expectation. Whatever it was, it didn't follow her into the next breath. Jenna reached out, gently took her hand. "You okay?" she asked. Nancy opened her eyes. "I'm not just okay." She lifted her other hand. Steady, clear, strong. "I'm here," she said. Fully. They stood there together. 3 women, 3 generations of a family that had been rebuilt, not inherited. The waves lapped close but never touched them. The sky held no threat, only promise. And behind them, the past burned small and quiet in memory. Smoke, long cleared. Only light remained. The rotunda smelled faintly of marble dust and filtered coffee. Somewhere down the hall, a staffer's shoes clicked briskly across tile. But in the hearing chamber, all was still. Nancy sat at the witness table beneath the soft glow of congressional lights. Her scarf was royal blue today, pinned with a silver brooch shaped like an open book. The 4th port under her sleeve had been taped carefully. Jenna sat behind her, holding Lexi in her lap, arms wrapped like a quiet shield. C-SPAN's red light flicked on. A hush fell over the room. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Holloway, when you're ready." Nancy leaned forward slightly. No notes. Just her voice. "I was 68 when my own daughter called me a resource drain," she began, voice even. "She said it in my home, over ice, to someone who wasn't family, while I was recovering from a round of chemo. I remember the sound of it more than the words." She paused. Let the silence settle around it. I was not confused. I was not incoherent. I was not ungrateful. I was simply in the way. More silence. Respectful. Unflinching. I speak today not for pity, but for precedent, because my story isn't rare. It's just recorded. She held up a copy of her memoir. The title visible. The tabs and dog-eared corners visible too. It was worn now, loved by strangers. "Held while draining isn't about vengeance," she said. "It's about boundary. It's about proving that elder abuse doesn't always wear bruises. It sometimes wears manicures and entitlement." A woman 2 rows back wiped tears with the edge of her blazer. Later that month, Congress passed the Holloway Clause, an elder protection statute expanding legal avenues for those experiencing non-physical domestic abuse by adult children. Financial guardianship, estate pressure, coerced care, all now codified under the same protective lens as other forms of harm. At the signing, they quoted her book aloud. "You cannot inherit what you never nurtured. Blood earns nothing but a name." Nancy didn't attend the ceremony. She said everything she needed to. Instead, she was home by the fireplace, curled on her reading chair with Jenna beside her. A reporter emailed to ask how it felt to be the catalyst behind federal reform. Nancy replied with a single image, a tiny card propped on her bookshelf, written in black ink, "Drained the account, kept the soul." That night, Jenna brought her the final bound copy of the expanded memoir, annotated for educators and legal advocates. It was already being taught in 2 university programs. Nancy turned to the back. There, in delicate type, was her final entry. "I lived. Fully, loudly, unapologetically. I was not rescued. I rose. And when the smoke cleared, the story was still mine." She ran her fingers over the print. "I was never weak," she whispered to Jenna, voice hoarse with something deeper than age. "Just underestimated." Jenna leaned down and hugged her, tightly, carefully, reverently. "I know," she said. Nancy's breath was steady. Her hands no longer shook. Across the room, Lexi had placed her drawing on the window. A sun with extra arms, wrapped around 3 stick figures. At the top, in crayon-scrawled letters, "My family." Nancy smiled and reached for her journal one last time. On the last page beneath the date, she wrote, "She thought I'd die quietly. I published the noise. And this time, there was nothing left to add."